All right, great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you again for joining me this afternoon for onboarding and offboarding best practices. Hoping to go through some effective strategies around the onboarding and offboarding process for student employees and what you all can be doing to prepare for both phases of that student employment experience as you bring new students onto your team or as you get ready to celebrate that next journey with some students who might be graduating or pursuing that next opportunity. I hope that the semester is wrapping up well for everyone. This topic felt fitting for this time of year, just with graduation happening next week. Some of us might have students who are getting ready to leave. Maybe they are pursuing an internship or another job that's taking them away from their student employment position. But with that offboarding, hopefully we have the opportunity to onboard some new students to that role as well. So sort of combining the two here, and what I'll be doing throughout today's session is just going over a little bit about what our working learner demographics look like here at ASU and why onboarding and offboarding are so integral to the student employment experience and that student employment journey. We'll start off by talking about onboarding preparation, process, and resources, and then we will move into offboarding preparation, process, and resources. And then we'll open it up for some questions and an opportunity for you all to share any best practices that you might have around onboarding or offboarding student employees. So, some of you may have seen this slide before or seen some of this data, but I think it's really important to highlight just kind of before we go into some of those logistics and processes around onboarding and offboarding, because I think it paints the picture for what our student employment population looks like here at ASU, and also why we have such an opportunity with an experience like student employment to elevate it to be a career and professional development opportunity, to be a work integrated learning experience for our students. So the data on the left side of the screen actually comes from our own annual student employment survey that we facilitate here at ASU. You might remember getting a survey to complete sometime in February earlier this year. That goes out to all student employees and supervisors on an annual basis. And from that survey, we identified that 50% of working learners here at ASU have a high or very high financial need. And then in addition to that, a disproportionate percentage of students in this group are also part of historically marginalized and disenfranchised communities. What this tells us is that low income working learners are even more or even less likely to earn a credential, even if they have that high academic performance. And what we also know about our student employees here at ASU and across the country is that oftentimes students who have to or choosing to work while they are attending college are oftentimes sort of balancing responsibilities and priorities across their available time, across available resources. Um, these students who are employees are oftentimes also the ones who are most in need of our support, but they're less likely to get the connections they need and are facing the most barriers to their student success. So I mentioned this briefly, but there's also a study that was done by Georgetown University, and they identified that many students who work full-time or part-time positions are facing that very unique dilemma where they're juggling and managing those demands across their available time, their available resources, and also their energy. For many of our student employees, this dilemma is impacting not only their academic progress and success, but also future career opportunities and long-term financial mobility. So that sort of leads into the data that you're seeing on the right side of the screen here. So there was a study that was done by Strada Education Foundation, and this was a survey that was sent out to students post-graduation. And what they found is that less than 50% of college graduates find purposeful work. So what that means is that students are entering jobs or careers, and it's not exactly what they had expected or anticipated. or they're not contributing in a way that they had maybe expected to. 52% of graduates are underemployed a year after graduation, meaning that they're entering careers or opportunities that they are technically maybe overqualified for or have a higher credential than is required for that position. But they're struggling to make those connections between the work that they're doing through an experience like student employment or an internship or just simply what they're learning through academics here at ASU and how that sort of connects to the job that they want to pursue once they're graduating, which is then leading to that underemployment. And then unfortunately, 73% of graduates who start out underemployed are remaining so 10 years after completing college. So they're already facing that initial setback, and then it's even harder for them to get back to that baseline where they should have been originally, based off of the credentials and experiences that we know that they've gained during their time here at ASU. Many students are missing out on early work-based experiences, and that's limiting their ability to apply skills and confidently pursue career goals. When we think about things like an internship, or study abroad or even research, sometimes those opportunities aren't presented to students until, halfway through their degree program, their juniors or seniors. Sometimes they're not a part of their degree program, and so that's something additional that they have to go and seek out. And by the time that they participate in some of those work-based learning experiences, at that point in their degree, they might feel like they can't go back. They can't change their major. Maybe this isn't exactly what they wanted to pursue, but they feel like they're too far along that they can't really pursue something else at this point. And that's really where something like student employment comes into play. It's an experience that already exists, that students are already participating in, that we have the opportunity to elevate to be a true integrated working and learning experience for our student employees. It's something that they can participate from the time that they enter into college and hopefully get some of that exploration and clarity around what they want to pursue post-graduation. Something else to keep in mind is that internships, while sort of that gold standard for these work-based learning experiences, they aren't always accessible at scale. When we think about how many students we have here at ASU, I think we're at upwards of 190,000. There just simply aren't enough internships to go around for the students who want them. And so that really kind of emphasizes the importance of taking something like student employment and really trying to make it, a similar experience as possible to something like an internship where they can build those transferable skills and have the opportunity to do some career exploration and prepare them for entering the workforce or whatever that next opportunity is once they graduate. And so you're probably saying, what does this all have to do with onboarding or offboarding? And I think that's important to highlight because, onboarding in particular is really that first introduction that students have to student employment. And offboarding is sort of setting the tone for what they should expect moving forward. And so I want to spend a moment just grounding us in this journey map that you'll see on the screen, because I think it really highlights something we don't always realize. Every single stage of the student employment experience matters. It's not just onboarding, it's not just that performance management, and it's not just offboarding. Each moment is ultimately connected, and each stage sets the tone for what's to come next. When a student applies for a job, they're already starting to form expectations. They're asking, do I feel seen? Is this process clear? Does this organization value me? That application experience is going to shape how they show up to that interview. Then once they're in the interview, we're not just evaluating them. They should also be thinking about evaluating us. They are hopefully learning about what professionalism looks like in this type of environment, what kinds of questions are valued, and whether they can see themselves in this role if it's going to support them. And that directly impacts how they then enter the role if they are hired. When we move into hiring and onboarding, this is where we have an opportunity to really solidify those expectations. And onboarding, I think, is one of the most powerful moments and opportunities that we have. It's going to communicate that belonging, that clarity, and the purpose of the role that the student has been hired for. And if we're not intentional, it can actually communicate confusion or disconnection. And that's going to ultimately carry forward to these other phases of that student employment experience. From there, we're going into goal setting and professional development. And hopefully, these aren't just nice steps to have. They should ultimately be signaling to students that this job is more than just the tasks. It's a learning experience. It tells them we expect you to grow here and we're going to support you in that growth. How students start off on day one in the job is hopefully not how they finish the role. We want to help them grow and develop as a professional in the role, but also just as a young professional, as a college student, as an adult. This is an opportunity. We don't expect them to know everything from day one, but their willingness to learn and to incorporate feedback, that's all a part of this goal setting and professional development stages. And then finally, we get to celebrating the next journey, which is often sometimes something we can overlook. I want you to think of onboarding as not necessarily the end. It's really the moment where students are able to make meaning of the experience that they just participated in. It's where they're hopefully able to connect the dots and carry those lessons into that next job, that internship or career that they're ending up pursuing. So really kind of the takeaway here is students don't separate these stages the way that we would administratively. We're looking at this map, we kind of break it down into these different phases as maybe hiring managers and supervisors throughout this experience. But for our students, this experience is really just one continuous story. And each interaction, each process, each conversation is teaching them what they should expect from work in the future. And that's really why being intentional at every stage really matters. We're not just managing students, we're hopefully shaping how they understand work itself. So from here, I want to dive into the importance of onboarding. When onboarding is done well, it helps students feel like they actually belong to a team, not just like they're filling a role. That early sense of connection can make a big difference in how comfortable they feel contributing. It's also going to be where students start to feel and build confidence in real, tangible ways. Not just I feel good, but I know what I'm supposed to do, and I know where to go for help, and I understand how my role fits in. Another piece here is support. Onboarding is often when students decide, is this a place where I can ask questions, or do I need to figure out things on my own? And that perception really sticks with students along the way. First, first impressions matter, but in onboarding, it's less about, being polished and more about being clear and intentional. So small things like having a plan for their first day or introducing them to the team and the individuals that they'll interact with throughout the office can really shape that experience. There's also an efficiency side to onboarding. So a more structured onboarding process is going to save time in the long run. You'll hopefully get fewer repeated questions, fewer misunderstandings, and a smoother transition into their responsibilities. I fully recognize I am a supervisor of student employees myself. Onboarding is no small task. It takes time. And sometimes we don't always have the time that we want or that we need to dedicate to onboarding or sort of training our student employees. But understanding the importance of why we need to set aside that time and really build in the time to onboard and to train our student employees, because that's going to affect everything moving forward. They're not properly trained, if they don't understand, how they're contributing to the team or the department, that's going to affect how they do their work moving forward, which can eventually create more work for you in the future, which is really counterproductive. A lot of times we're hiring student employees to support with whatever our team needs are. And so investing that time up front is really ultimately going to help you in the long run. It's going to hopefully take some of that, time off of your plate, that you have someone that you have intentionally and thoughtfully trained and onboarded to the role that you can trust to handle certain responsibilities and tasks and take some of those things off of your plate. We tend to see that that investment is also reflected in retention. So students are more likely to stay with a position when they feel prepared and also when they feel supported early on. So if you are investing that time up front, you are helping the student, understand how they are supporting the team and how they're contributing to the team with their work. That can lead to retention so that, you maybe have a student from the time that they're a first year student to the time that they are graduating. And then you don't have to do onboarding as much. Ideally, onboarding also sets students up to become more independent over time. You're giving them the foundation so they don't have to rely on constant direction. So again, that's all part of that investment in that time and training initially when they first start in their role. And then finally, this is one of your earliest chances to notice when students might need additional support. Are they picking up things quickly? Are there gaps in skills or confidence? Onboarding is really going to give you that initial insight as well. How much additional time do you maybe need to invest? Where do you need to maybe pay close attention to how they are grasping or understanding specific tasks or responsibilities within their role? Where do you think that they might require additional development? Where do you also see some of their strength lying? Where do you think that you can maybe give them a task and they can kind of run with it within their first week or two? So really having that opportunity to get to know the student and identifying those skills, both what they have already and where there might be some gaps. So I think really the shift here is moving from onboarding less as a checklist of tasks to onboarding as a structured experience that's going to set students up to succeed. That's not to say that there aren't, logistical or foundational pieces of onboarding that have to be done in the first place. So one thing to kind of keep in mind too, I think that is really helpful as you prepare to onboard students is this pre-onboarding, this preparation process, because that's ultimately going to support you in having the time, having that organization to really focus and give the attention that you need to the onboarding and training process for your students. So this is going to make a big difference is that work that we put in before a student's first day. And I've really seen it sort of go both ways. Sometimes a student shows up and we're still figuring things out. Maybe we're looking at our computer. We don't have time blocked on our calendar to actually meet and support with the student. We're not 100% sure what their first day should look like. But then there's other times where everything is ready and it just feels completely different. You're prepared for that student's first day. And a lot of that really comes down to preparation. And I also think the other thing to keep in mind here is that students can tell when we are prepared or not prepared for welcoming them to the team or training them for the role that they're going to be working. Things like having a very clear job description. So before you even post that job, making sure that you're spending time reviewing that job description. Maybe you're backfilling a position that you've had previously. Before you repost that, maybe take a couple of minutes and look through what is actually what now that we've had a student in this role for however amount of time, what did they actually do? What maybe something additional that we added to their list of responsibilities or tasks that doesn't currently exist in this job description. And that's going to help you to set those expectations. But again, if those aren't clear, students are able to pick up on that really quickly. They start wondering what they're actually supposed to be doing. Same thing with those administrative tasks. If paperwork or system access is not ready, their first impression of the job is waiting while we figure those things out. And that's not really the tone that we want to set. So think about, preparing for that first day. Do they need access to shared drives? Have you sent them that Slack notification or invitation for them to join your particular workspace or channels that you want them to be a part of? Do they have, the contact information that they need for you or other people who are going to be supporting with that first day? Do they know where to go on their first day? That kind of leads into that communication piece. Are we clearly communicating with them leading up to that first day around expectations of what time that we want them there for their first day? Where to go? What to bring with them? Do they need to bring a laptop? Should they bring their lunch, depending on, the amount of time that they're going to be there? Do they need to bring, things for I-9 processes or documentation? What should they be wearing for their first day? So really staying in high communication with the students leading up to their first day is really going to help, again, set the tone, help you feel more prepared. A lot of those, administrative pieces that you have to cover on the first day might be able to be addressed leading up to that day. If you've set the expectation around time, what professionalism look like around dress, what your expectations are around what they should expect to come in ready to do on their first day and any day that they begin to work. Um, the other piece here is that workspace setup. So also identifying where are they going to be working? Do they have technology access? What are they going to need access to? Where are they going to be sitting day in and day out? So whether that's their desk or a login, just having something ready for them to jump into. For us in our office in particular, we have shared computers. So making sure that they have the login information for those computers and that they're ready to go once they sit down on that first day. And this is going to help show them that we were expecting them and that we planned for them to be there. We are ready for them to be a part of our team and to begin working. And I've said this already, but students can tell. They can tell when we're ready for them and they can tell when we're not. And that's really going to shape how they walk into the role on day one. So want to break down the onboarding process into a few different phases. So starting with day one, it's always good to start with a warm welcome, setting that time aside to make sure that you are there to greet them, to help them log into their technology or get set up in their workspace, that they know where to go, and introducing them to the team and to the space. So I think it's really easy sometimes for us because students maybe don't have as much interaction with other individuals, whether that's staff or leadership on our team, that we don't always think to introduce them. But I think that's really a part of creating that affinity to the work that they're doing and to kind of let them know, how they're contributing to the bigger goals and work happening within your department or team. It's really helpful to also start off by reviewing ASU's charter and mission. So starting off with those core values. How does your work connect back to that charter? I just onboarded a student earlier this week and I asked him if he had ever seen the charter, and he said, yes, it's everywhere. But then when we actually sat down and went through it and we talked about how, our work specifically or the core values that we have within university college also align with ASU's core values, I think it helped him to make the connection a little bit more between our work and also what that charter actually looks like in action. Because sometimes students see that and it's a lot of words, but what does it actually look like in the work that we're doing? And then next, begin onboarding. So discussing those expectations, trainings, schedules, all of the things that they need to know to be successful and set up for the rest of their week or for, the first couple of weeks within the role. Um, some things that I use for my onboarding process are like project management tools. So my department uses monday.com and we actually create a onboarding board that has all of the tasks, links to all of the trainings that they need to complete, login information to the different uh, pieces of software that they'll need access to in their role. And that is how we sort of keep track of where they are at in the process, what has been completed, what still needs to be done. You can use other things, and I'm going to show you a few other tools that you can use that are sort of similar to managing those onboarding or more logistical administrative pieces of introducing a student to the role shortly. But really sort of think about what do you use, what does your team sort of use for organizing or managing tasks and projects and responsibilities, and how can you maybe integrate some of the onboarding process into what you're already using. Within the first week, make sure that they're completing those mandatory trainings or job-specific trainings. Students who are hired will have workday trainings that they need to complete. They are not always the exact same that we as professional staff need to complete, but they do still have to complete workday trainings. So you can walk them through how to access their workday, and it's usually right on their homepage of what needs to be completed. we as supervisors on the homepage of our Workday, you can see your list of staff. And then if they have any required or team trainings that need to be completed, you can go into Workday and actually see what needs to be done or if they've completed those or not. For example, I have a student employee who has not completed their annual fire safety training. And so on my Workday, I am able to see that they have a required training that needs to be completed. Administrative tasks, ensuring all necessary paperwork is completed, making sure that students have submitted all of that I-9 documentation to Workday. For international students, it's going to be a little bit of a different process. They have to complete the I-9. They also have to get their social security number if they don't have one already from a past student employment job. So trying to build in some time within their first week where you can allow them to take care of those things so that they don't feel that pressure to do them outside of work or between their class schedule and work schedule, maybe allowing them to leave an hour or half hour early from their regular scheduled shift to maybe go and take care of some of those other administrative tasks. Also, be sure to review all available ASU resources with them. So this might be a student's first job. This might be their first connection to a lot of the different resources that we have here at ASU. Maybe they're not involved in any other clubs or organizations, or they get too many emails to keep track of all the different resources or opportunities available to them. So spending some time connecting them with those things that will be beneficial to them both on the job as well as a student, as a young adult thinking about their career and those opportunities that they have available to them as a student here at ASU. And then ongoing, schedule meetings, schedule regular check-ins to provide that feedback, adjust their onboarding to see how they are understanding everything that you've been going over, how they're adjusting to the team. I know that regular check-ins or one-on-ones are not always feasible for every team, depending on the number of student employees that you have. But at least within that first couple of weeks or month, as you're hiring or onboarding new students, try to have at least a touch base to check in with them and see how things are going. Um, Maybe you don't have regular one-on-ones, but you have team meetings based off of the size of your teams. So ensuring that they are included in those calendar invites, that they know when that meeting cadence is happening on a regular basis so that they can be available and prepared to attend. Um, those meetings can also serve as an opportunity for you to help them understand their daily tasks and projects, verifying that they have all of the access that they need, and resources and tools to support them with whatever tasks or projects they're responsible for. Best practices. So these seem sort of straightforward, but I do think that they are really helpful as you are starting to plan and organize an onboarding process. So structure, that preparation, making sure that you feel prepared for your student to start, because again, they can sense when we are not prepared. I think it is better to push back their start date to allow you to, make sure you have that dedicated time up front, because that will ultimately benefit you in the long run, that they were able to onboard successfully, they understand all of the information correctly. It's going to hopefully take some things off of your plate if they're someone you can trust and that they do the job well. And all of that starts from onboarding. Engagement. So, when I talk about the onboarding process and the investment of our time, maybe that first day is us working directly with them. But then maybe throughout that first week or those first couple of weeks, you engage other student employees to support with their onboarding process or other professional staff who they might be working with along the way. On my team in particular, I have students who report to me, but I also have a program coordinator. Something that she works on that also my student employees work on is our newsletter. So I might have her handle that training for the newsletter, something that she is just as familiar with as I am, and that the students would be working with her and I on. She has the opportunity to train them and engage with them on that particular topic. Development, include time for your working learners to focus on their own career development. So this can happen in a few different ways, whether that's in that first meeting or check-in with them, getting to know them, understanding where their career goals and interests are, and then figuring out ways to engage those interests along the way, whether that's giving them opportunities to participate in tasks or projects that are closely aligned with those interests, or sending them opportunities to attend a career fair or to go meet with a career advisor, or having them use some of the Work Plus resources around career and professional development, like our LinkedIn learnings that we have that are mapped to each of the NACE career competencies or the Work Plus pathway. So those are opportunities that you can use to build in the development of your students along the way. And then celebrate, help boost their morale, reinforce positive behaviors, and foster that sense of value and motivation. In the first week, again, we're sort of setting that first impression. What do you want to celebrate or recognize that they're doing really well? Reinforcing those expectations and what you're sort of looking for from them as a supervisor. So I'm going to pause sharing here, and then I will actually share a couple of links into the chat. For those of you who haven't seen yet, we recently just launched a new student employment website that we built in collaboration with HR, Career Services, ISSC, Financial Aid, and WorkPlus. Previously, a lot of our resources were existing on our own websites, but we came together and worked on creating a student employment website that housed all of those different resources and information that both students and supervisors need. So what I just put into the chat now is the link to this specific web page that you're seeing on the screen here, which is general onboarding training. And I will switch over to show that as well. So for supervisors, we have resources and tools to support various different stages of that student employment journey, from creating the actual role, the job description, to the interviewing and hiring process, to now going into the onboarding process. So we do have a general onboarding training template. I think he might actually be here, but Jack from ASU Admissions, he actually designed a Canvas onboarding course for his own student employees. And he was nice enough to recreate sort of a skeleton version without all of the specific admissions specific trainings built into that. But you have the ability to go to this website and you can enroll in the template course. And then there's instructions for how you can copy the course and then recreate your own version of that onboarding course. So if you prefer to use Canvas, there is a way to do that very easy for you to kind of get the basics of what you need, and then you can build in more specific trainings from there. If you prefer just kind of seeing the structure of what that would look like and you don't want to use Canvas, maybe you have a different platform or software that you use, we have this template that walks you through how you might want to build that, again, through a different platform. So you can still sort of get everything that is in that Canvas course and just recreate it in a version that fits better with your team. Also on onboarding, we have just a general checklist as well that you have access to. So if you don't want to create a course or create a version of it, you just want something that you can kind of easily refer to, we have a checklist that will help you walk through the most important things to take care of within that first day, that first week, that first month of onboarding the student employees. And again, that link is in the chat. All right, so now we are going to transition to offboarding student employees. So starting off with the importance of effective onboarding. So this is now the end of that student employment journey. They are getting ready for that next opportunity, whether that is just a different job, an internship, they're graduating, they're maybe doing study abroad, whatever it is. This is really where we have the opportunity to take everything that we sort of structured around onboarding, but now put it into, framing of like, let's sort of reflect on everything that you've learned throughout this experience and how you will sort of apply that learning and experience moving forward. For a lot of students, this is maybe the first time that they really pause and think about what they're taking away from a job. Up until this point, they might have been focused on just doing the work and sort of meeting those expectations. But throughout the offboarding process is where we really have the opportunity to help them start making sense of it all. So this is where we can reinforce the value of their work and contributions. They can put language to their experience. What did I learn? What skills did I build? How do I talk about this in an interview? And most students need a little support to be able to do that well. Um, you know, Talking with their supervisor firsthand, the someone who has worked with them day in and day out, who can help them in articulating those experiences, can be really impactful for students. This is also an opportunity to provide closure and a sense of completion, reinforce that their work mattered. Even a short conversation that names their contributions can really stick with them and help them to build their confidence going into, again, whatever is going to come next. That's also a benefit for us too. Those conversations that we have can help give us meaningful insight into what's working well and, what the student's perspective is, what they experience through the opportunity, where there might be opportunities to focus on some challenges that they faced, how we sort of reevaluate the structure of the role moving forward. But ultimately, that conversation really is going to help them strengthen that confidence and better articulate their skills and experiences for those future roles. It's also going to, like I mentioned, create that meaningful feedback both directions. So as part of the offboarding process, give students the opportunity to provide you with feedback. Let them share their experiences and their perspectives. It will support career readiness. Helping them connect the things that they're doing to those transferable skills through the NACE career competencies. Articulation is sometimes one of the harder pieces for students to do, especially if their student employment position isn't quite as obviously connected to what they want to do post graduation. But having these conversations with them around the particular skills that they built and how those skills are actually transferable or applicable to the types of careers or opportunities they want to pursue next is going to help them to build that career readiness and build that confidence around articulating those skills. And then it's going to leave a lasting impression. So really this student employment experience, we want to sort of set the tone. What should they expect, in future jobs or future opportunities? If you've ever interviewed a student or if you've ever been in an interview, we sometimes say like you're interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. You need to make sure that it's the right fit for you. And so how we sort of structure this experience for our students can leave that lasting impression. It's going to sort of set the bar for what they want or need out of a supervisor or a work environment moving forward. And then hopefully it also is going to help to maintain relationships and future connections. Starting off, students who are entering the workforce or that next opportunity, think about, how many connections we maybe have if we're further along in our career, but who can a student sort of go to for that letter of recommendation or that reference, depending on, what stage they're at or how far along they are in experience. So helping them create those connections, someone who can sort of speak to the work that they've been doing. So with the offboarding process, I sort of break it into two different parts. There's the part that we have to do as supervisors, sort of on that administrative side of things. And then there's those meaningful experiences that we can sort of build in to that offboarding process that will help to make that impact for students. So on the required side, you want to make sure that your students are submitting either a letter of recommendation or a notice of, or I'm sorry, not a letter of recommendation, a letter of resignation or a notice of when their job is going to end. So that could be as simple as, they're putting in their 2 weeks, they send you an email with their name, the end date for their role, Maybe they are graduating, and so you send them an email saying that, due to your graduation, your employment will end on this date. And that's typically something that you need to submit and process with your department's HR. This will make sure that on their end, they are able to, remove the student from Workday, that they're no longer a part of that org chart because they've graduated or they've moved on to that next opportunity. The other piece is wrapping up that work, making sure that anything that they have in progress is being completed or that they're transitioning projects and responsibility. Knowledge transfer. This isn't necessarily required, but it is something that I strongly recommend when offboarding students. Who knows best what a student did in their role? Yes, we as supervisors, we are supervising them, but the student knows what they were sort of responsible for day in and day out, best practices, tips, and tricks for being successful in their role. So I have students actually document the process of doing their role. This is a way for me to reevaluate their job description, making sure that there's still alignment with what I had in the job description originally and what they actually did. But it's also a really helpful training resource for when I am eventually filling their role, and I can have a student go through and see from the perspective of the person who was last in this job, what is important to know, what sort of different links and access are helpful, and sort of how they've sort of developed their processes for doing particular tasks or projects along the way. Returning access and equipment. So if they had technology, making sure that that gets returned. Removing their access from, there might be software or technology outside of ASU specifically. For example, like Monday.com, once a student, is offboarded from ASU, they don't necessarily lose their access from Monday. So making sure that I remove them from that. Or another example is Google Drive. If you have a shared drive that you share internally, they don't get automatically removed from that just because they are leaving their position. So making sure to remove that access. And then also workspace cleanup, leaving their station clean and ready for the next person, or just clean and whoever comes in next is able to use it. And then final logistics. So students need to make sure that all of their hours are submitted up until their last day. Last day expectation. So maybe that's, I need you to come in person. We'll have sort of an exit interview. What you can kind of tell them in terms of expectations moving forward, whether that's, hey, I would love to be a reference for you, or let me know if you ever need a letter of recommendation. On the recommended side with reflection and career readiness, um, this is where I think we have the opportunity to help connect those dots again, between the work that they've done and what they want to do moving forward. So have those reflection conversations, discuss what they learned and those key takeaways. Maybe you do an end of employment evaluation, where this is an opportunity for you to kind of walk through where you saw their strengths, where you might be maybe need to see them develop a little bit further moving forward in order to be successful in what they want to pursue. Skill articulation. So I mentioned this earlier, helping them translate that experience into their resume and LinkedIn language. Maybe leading up to their last day, you ask them to update their resume, and then you do a review with them, or you tell them to post on LinkedIn saying that they're wrapping up this experience and sort of reflect on the things that they learned that they gained. That's also a part of that career support, discussing those next steps and those future goals and how you can sort of serve as a support or resource, or what you might encourage them to do in order to support those goals moving forward. And then recognition, acknowledging their contributions and impact. I also fully recognize that depending on the student, I know that it's not always sunshine and flowers. We do sometimes have difficult students, or we have to offboard them from our choice, not necessarily from theirs. And so some of these things don't necessarily apply. Obviously, I think evaluation is really helpful if you're not leaving the student on the best terms. And sort of setting those expectations, based off of our time together. I wouldn't be able to provide a letter of recommendation, or at least not the most positive. I can speak to these strengths, but not necessarily these. Whereas those logistics and those transition pieces do sort of work in to that offboarding process for those types of students, regardless. I'm going to share a couple more resources into the chat, but we've got quite a few to support you around offboarding your student employees. So the first one is a link for writing strong letters of recommendation for student employees. So if you are willing to write your student a letter of recommendation, I certainly recognize that can be time consuming, especially if you have many of them. So that document kind of templates out some questions that you can be responding to, some areas of focus that you might want to include in your letter of recommendation. And at the bottom of the resource, it actually will give you an AI prompt that you can then put your responses um, into your AI, whether that's ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and based off of the prompt that you give to the AI, it will hopefully put together a strong letter of recommendation for you. I actually just tried this out. I have 6 students who are graduating, so I use this template firsthand. I responded to the questions. Sometimes my response to the question weren't full sentences. It was kind of like, let me just brain dump because I have a lot of great things to say and I need uh, AI to then kind of put it together in a comprehensive letter for me. And they all came out great. And they were specific to the actual experiences that I had. They were my own sort of thoughts and words, but it just helped to kind of organize it and put it into a well-written letter and saved me quite a bit of time. We also have an offboarding checklist as well. So very similar to um, the onboarding checklist, those more logistical transition pieces that I just went over to ensure that those are being met and that you're covering all of your bases before you offboard a student. You have that checklist that you are able to refer to. And then we also have a evaluation template. So for student employees, there is not a formal evaluation process for them here at ASU. We as professional staff are, required to do our workday check-ins on that semesterly basis, but the same thing doesn't exist for our student employees. And so I know that a lot of supervisors do still want to give thoughtful and intentional feedback or evaluation to their students. And so that resource just helps to kind of frame that, what areas you should focus on. There is a template in there for end of employment. So if you want to do a formal like exit interview as a part of your offboarding process, you are able to use that end of employment template to support you with that conversation and things that you want to focus on and discuss with the student. The other piece I wanted to mention was the ASU Career Readiness Inventory. So you all may have been receiving emails about this over the last month or so, but this is another great tool for the offboarding process, but also for the onboarding process. For offboarding in particular, if you need to sort of conceptualize the work that they've done or sort of map those experiences to specific competencies, this is a tool that helps to make those connections and connect those dots, sort of giving you also tangible scores that you can talk a little bit more about where a student's strengths lie around some of those transferable skills. Where do they maybe need to continue to focus or develop on? The reason why I say this is also a good resource for onboarding is because maybe you have a student take this as a part of that onboarding process as like a baseline, and you use this to sort of measure their growth semester over semester. So it's a great tool to support with that as well. All right. Well, I have talked for quite a while. I appreciate you all listening to me, but I want to open it up for any questions or any best practices, tips that you all have to share with this group as supervisors of student employees yourself.
If I could jump into maybe Um, although not maybe answering the question. If anyone, I kind of shared a little bit ago, but I'm hiring right now, final stages of a new working learner, hopefully coming after convocation. So for anyone who's like has done onboarding, if you have any like good tips or things that you would do, like yes, if I'm onboarding a student again for the first time, like this is what I would do. That would be helpful for me too, if that helps.
And Michael, this is a brand new role for you, right? So this isn't one that you're backfilling at all. So you've sort of had to create the job description and everything. And so this will be brand new.
Yes, yeah, I like my colleague Alyssa, who's on here somewhere. We were like, we are dying, and so we pitched the working learner position to our director, and she was like, yes, and like got it all pushed through, and yeah, now we're did all the back end work, and now we have our final candidate. We're just doing the HR stuff. They're a previous student worker, and I'm kind of battling some of those things that I might slack you about, Amanda.
Sure.
See if you have experience on. But yeah, brand new to the department, first working learner this department has had. So yeah, super excited. If anyone has tips or anything, um, happy to hear them.
I would just say, I think you did a great job of this as a part of your pitch in terms of being really clear around what you sort of anticipate this role to support with day in and day out, what their sort of responsibilities will look like. And so I think being really clear on those expectations with the student as well, but also being transparent with them that this is a brand new role. And so there is opportunity for them to give feedback or you maybe make adjustments along the way from learning, how it actually comes to fruition and they're actually doing the job. And so being transparent with them about that and keeping it open for them to provide feedback along the way or ideas that they might have to sort of better structure the role or what they can sort of be responsible for maybe outside of the original scope of work that you had laid out.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Mia had a question in the chat um, about onboarding remote students. So, any suggestions for onboarding in a remote work environment specifically?
I mean, that can be for you too, Amanda. Like if there's anything that you would change about or I think it requires definitely more sort of scaffolding, like almost more
Yeah.
intentionality since they can't sort of knock on someone's door. But I don't know if you have anything that you would recommend being really intentional about.
So, are you fully remote, Mia, or are you
No, I am in person, but
okay?
we offer remote positions to our student workers to increase accessibility because a
Yeah.
lot of them have childcare and other situations. We're on the downtown campus, so that's
Okay.
another place where asking people to park on the downtown campus and pay for all of that, it sort of limited our pool. So we offered remote work as a attempt to make our positions more accessible for folks.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're probably doing a lot of the things that I will probably suggest, but connecting with them over Zoom or virtually as much as you can, especially during that first week or that first month, being extremely clear on expectations. I think especially with remote work, sometimes we don't want students to take advantage of the fact that they aren't in person or that we can't really monitor in the moment that they are actually working. So just being really clear with them around those expectations and how you sort of expect communication to work in a fully remote environment and sort of keeping you updated. I feel like maybe over communication might be really helpful and necessary for you all in that setting, both in terms of like what they're working on, but also if they have questions along the way so that you can better understand how to support them. Um, I feel like I don't have the exact experience with this, but I've had, some students that I've hired and I've allowed to work remote over the summer because they are going back home to their home country. I still want them to be able to earn an income. And so before I ever allow that, I'm very clear on, what I sort of expect in terms of I have them send me a check-in message at the start of their shift of like, hey, I'm logging in for the day. I also ask them to let me know what they're working on for that day, any documents that they are working on. I'll make sure that I have access to so that if I needed to go in, I can sort of check that the work is being done or that there's progress being made. And then I also have them send a checkout message as well. And that checkout message doesn't go just to me. We have a channel, a Slack channel for all of our working learners where they each send a checkout message at the end of their shifts. And it's helpful for me to see, hey, I'm wrapping up for the day, but it's also helpful for the rest of the team for them to see what each of them are working on, where they left off with things so that if, a student is not working that next day, I might be able to pull another student and they can pick up where that student left off. They're maybe linking those documents or their in progress tasks that way. I don't know if that was helpful at all.
It is. Can I ask a quick follow-up?
Yeah.
Which is that so we've done check-in messages, and that's been helpful. I have some students who I think they probably work way more hours than we pay them for, and they like I'm like there's no problem, and then others sort of do have a harder time, and I do think you sort of need a closer accompaniment of work. Do you, if you're going to set the standard of check-in messages, like do you need to do it for the whole team in your experience, or can you kind of individualize those expectations based on the worker profile?
I mean, for the check-in messages, it's really just a, hey, I've logged on for the day. For some of my students that I do have to watch a little bit more closely, I have asked them to include in their check-in message what they're working on for that day. And so that's helpful for me, especially again, keeping track of their schedules, the hours and days that they're working. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I forgot you were even working today, which is terrible to say. But, sometimes we can lose track of them at times. But yeah, it's helpful for me to see that they're also taking some initiative with the things that they're working on. My expectation is also if you are wrapping up with someone and you're working or with something and you're working remote, you need to be reaching out to me to check in about what you can be moving on to and working on next. Um, with my team, since the expectation is for them to be in person and they have the option of working remote, one day a week, or if they are going home for like a break, um, it's always sort of the expectation I set is that I can take that away at any point. This is sort of um, a privilege that I'm extending to you. Please don't take advantage of it. Please make sure that you're following expectations so that you can continue to work remotely. So I've had students before where, halfway through the summer, they're becoming really inconsistent with check-ins or communication. And I've had to say, hey, I think we're going to need to cut back on hours, or I think maybe you should just kind of wrap up the summer at home and then you can jump back into work when you're back. So yeah, it is tricky sometimes working with them remote. And, hopefully you do have most students who are not just kind of like moving their mouse to stay active on Slack. But yeah, I think you do have to kind of play it by ear with each student around how much you're checking in or how much you can kind of trust them to work independently.
Thank you.
Awesome. There's great responses in the chat to Michael. That's great to see. Use the new worker questionnaire for public appreciation. Who knew? Yeah, sometimes students don't like to be recognized. Are there any other questions? I know we're at time. All right. Well, like I said, this session has been recorded, so I will